All right, let's introduce ourselves. Hey, everybody, I'm Jason Will. I'm joined by Sloan.
Roden. It sounded like you were going to forget it for a second.
So we're real estate agents.
Yes.
But we're also Democrats.
Yes.
In a very red area. We're the blue dot in the Red Sea.
Right. Yes.
And I messaged you. I was on the treadmill. When you're exercising, you're getting the creative juices flowing. I was like, I don't know. I just felt compelled to text you and see if you wanted to do this. And I thought it was a really bad idea. And you would say no.
I loved it so much. I love the idea because anytime we can gather and talk and work through things, I think is important. And I mean, it's really shown like the collective grief people have felt this past week. I don't want to liken this to 9/11, but the amount of people that I feel are in some sort of mourning is something really powerful, and that is drawing people together. And in a place like Alabama, we are like reaching out to the few people that we know have similar I wouldn't want to say like voting tendencies, but we have these threads that weave us together, and like we're latching onto that and sparking more of a community than I've ever seen Democrats have in Alabama.
Yeah. It's interesting. There seems to be, this was kind of a response, I think, for some people about our society being too sensitive. And I can just, and that, the Dem side is very weak and, has a lot of problems. And I can, there's been some folks, let me read you a headline here and get your thoughts on it. Your Body, My Choice. Attacks on women surge on social media following the election. So I feel like, the folks on the Republican side are just like, take your medicine, quit whining. But I think this grief is rooted in headlines like this. There's very real fears and people feel like freedom is being lost.
Yes.
There's some persecution. We talked about this before we hit record, that we get demonized.
Yep. There's also like a hope lost. I feel many women were, Roe v. Wade's already been overturned, but we're hoping that with a Kamala presidency, the hope of codifying abortion rights would have been on the table. And for those of us in Alabama, it's already been kicked to the states. We have some of the strictest abortion bans, and that is creating a very fearful environment for women who are currently carrying, and those who have hope to have children soon. I'm 36, and if I, chose to wait, I would be 40. It's really like if I were to have kids, this is really my do or die era. And I think a lot of women have that fear, and it is a future going to be lost because of this. And that could sound very, very over dramatic, but right now we are 8 days from like the election. It's still so heavy, and we're just feeling all of things and trying to work through these emotions.
Yeah. I've got a very Republican friend on this particular issue. He's just like, get in your car and drive to a place where you can get these procedures done. It's that simple, Tim. Just get in your car or get on a plane.
It's such...
How would you respond to him if he was sitting right here?
I don't know, but my reaction to you in this safe place is, he has no idea what privilege that is. And I'm going to take a side note. I posted something, kind of talking through my feelings last Wednesday. And a guy I know went to Alabama with, and his comment essentially was, you're going to make more money than you ever have in real estate. People will love you regardless. And it's like, but I'm not just voting for me, who would have the capacity to drive elsewhere. Now, from Birmingham, Alabama, I don't know where you can drive. We don't have a state immediately around us. But it affects everybody. So it's so short-sighted and privileged.
It is. And I would love to see this, because I want to, put this everywhere, and everybody can see just kind of, I think, how low budget this is, how spur of the moment this is. We're in Sloan's basement. These mics aren't even on. We're using lapel mics. This is just for us to, feel a little more official. But I hope that we get people reaching out and telling stories. Hey, I nearly died, or hey, this happened. Real live stories, so we can tell these people, like, it's not as simple as you think.
And it's not hyperbole.
Yeah. But I think if we had, and maybe even one day this will grow to where we have some Republican guests on, because I'm sure they would say, well, how you guys feel about that is how, if it was a Republican, let's say from Texas or Arizona, this is how we feel about busing the migrants to New York and wherever else they went, Chicago, because we wanted you to feel the impact. Now those communities are feeling the impact. So there's probably a mutual understanding from people in New York, in Chicago, and wherever else these migrants went. They're like, hey, this is a problem. So just trying to reach common ground. This same friend, they say, like, don't yell at people, and don't raise your voice. And the worst thing you can do is tell somebody they're dumb or retarded. But I did that to him. I had too much to drink, and he brought it up. We were out camping, and I thought, wow, I just really dropped the ball. But it was infuriating to me because he's so dead set in his stance, but thinks that Trump's challenging of the 2020 election results were fair and within his rights, and all he was trying to do was say, hey, just double check this. And I was like, well, didn't you hear that call in Georgia where he was asking him to find the 11,280 votes, whatever it was? He's like, no, I never heard that. And I just lost it. I'm like, you're so out of touch. Where are you getting your news from?
Yeah.
And he also went on this rampage about the cats and the dogs in Ohio, and thought that was real. During the first debate, when Trump said they're executing babies after birth, he said that's real. I've seen videos of that. None of this exists.
Like that's not an abortion, that's murder.
Yeah.
Like that.
So, and nowhere can they find the proof of this, but I guarantee you, he still thinks that's true. He still thinks that they were eating the cats, the dogs, and the geese, and all those things, and didn't see, for some reason, from their vantage point, they don't see, because I sent him an article, and I was like, there's bomb threats.
Yeah.
These people are getting harassed.
Right.
There's death threats. This community, the Republican governor, Republican mayor, the sheriff's department, they're all saying, stop with this bullcrap. So, that kind of stuff gets me really, really fired up. What about you? What are some of your, through this election cycle, what were some of your, can you recall some of your most frustrating moments?
I don't know. This election cycle, I really tried to protect my mental health. I got so invested in 20 that I just had to take a step back. And was I apathetic? Potentially. There's, I don't remember the stat, I don't remember where I heard it. It was like when Democrats win, they tend to get apathetic and then lose ground. And I'm sure I was one of them. Did
you have a deja vu feeling this time around with Hillary and Kamala, or did you really think in your heart of hearts that she had a real shot?
I remember waking up on the morning of the election of 2016 and texting one of my pledge sisters, who's my best friend. She married my first cousin, so now we're cousins. And saying how proud I was that we were about to elect the first female president of the United States. So like I was so in on Hillary, and this one, I didn't feel great about Biden, but I was going to vote for him. I didn't feel great about his likelihood of winning.
Yeah.
Not feel great about him. I didn't second guess his ability to lead our country. What was his ability to get reelected? And then when Trump got shot, I was like, "Oh, can we cuss on this?"
Yeah,
I was like, "Oh, we're fucked." And then when he announced that he's stepping down, I think Steph and I both were like, "Oh, we're fucked." And then the Charlie XCX called Kamala a brat. I was like, I'm so in.
Yeah.
And I got really excited because there was this excitement we've not had in the Democratic Party since Obama. And it felt like younger people were getting engaged and were excited, and we just didn't have two old white men who really both need to be sent out to pasture.
Yeah.
We had, this vibrant woman who I found so incredibly likable and believed in. But about a week before the election, I just got this gut feeling, and my anxiety really started to take over.
Yeah.
And just didn't have a good feeling about it. I will say, Steph, for everybody, that's my partner. She has a pretty good intuition.
Yeah.
And I said, "What is your gut saying?" And she even said, "I think she's going to win, but it's going to take a while and it's going to be contested." So looking into a crystal ball that none of us have. Where was your kind of like heart and gut? Because sometimes those align and sometimes they don't, leading up to November 5th.
So same thing. After the very close assassination attempt, when I saw that hand go up with the blood, I knew that was going to be what it became with the T-shirts and the billboards and all of it. And just, I was like, yeah, that's the end. There's no way that the Democratic Party is going to be able to overcome that. And then he just did so many dumb things down the line that kind of overshadowed such a, like momentous event in any election cycle. I mean, that would, you mentioned 9/11. It just I was like, that's a rallying thing. People are going to rally behind him. But it was like, I was just like, there's nothing the Democratic Party, no matter who, even if Gavin Newsom, the guy with the perfect teeth and the perfect hair, comes in and is the nominee, there's nothing they can do to overcome this.
Yeah.
But this just kind of shows you, I'm a huge Bill Maher fan, and Bill has been right a lot of the time about Trump. And he even said this cycle that he thought that people were finally starting to realize who Trump was.
Like the jig is up.
Yeah. And predicted Kamala was going to win. And he, I think even a week or two before the election, started thinking, y'all are going to make me look stupid, aren't you?
Yeah. I don't have a wide examples of this. So this is like a few personal examples in my life that now I'm going to paint with a broad brush.
Yeah.
I have heard different sides of my family, people around my grandparents' age, both from my family, from Steph's family. People, they were starting to question Trump and his ability, and is this guy who he says he is, and is he the answer? I fear many of those voters didn't vote.
Yeah.
Like, I know my grandfather was like, now this is from my dad, but my grandfather couldn't vote for Trump, but he just couldn't vote for Kamala. And a man who's in his 80s, I can't tell him like, oh, well, you chose the wrong thing. I guess I'm relieved he didn't vote for Trump. But, there's a lot of people who, well, then I'm just not going to vote. And that's also a problem. The thing in my life that I know that I will kind of liken it to is, were y'all living up here in 2017? Okay. Y'all might have gotten a little rumblings of this. I don't know if it like hit y'all as hard, but in 2017, I want to say it was 2017, when the special election, when Jeff Sessions was chosen to be a cabinet member, and we had the special election, it was Roy Moore, versus Doug Jones.
Yeah,
I think it was really big here because Doug's law practice was in Homewood from Mountain Brook, and so you get a lot of people riling him around him in our parts of the city. And you had this man who I would say is very similar to Trump in the things that he's been accused of.
Roy Moore.
Yeah, maybe worse so because it was like underage girls at the Gadsden Mall.
Right. Bad stuff.
Bad stuff. But friends of my parents who are lifetime Republicans, their response would be, well, I'm not voting for Roy Moore. I'm just voting for the Republican ticket.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, now you're just looking for an out to justify voting for this man who's a downright bad guy. And I think people probably use the same justifications. It's like, well, I'm not going to fill the bubble by his name, but I'll just do the straight party ticket. And then like my conscience is covered.
Well, I think, it would require a lot of research.
Yeah.
But there is, I just want to say, everybody needs to take this with a grain of salt because it's not totally rooted in, fact-based research. But I think it was around, let's say the 60s or the 70s, rich people started investing a lot of money in demonizing the left and Democrats. Mm-hmm. I'm talking mailers. Mm-hmm. There's been, and it's been something that has never wavered. It's only increased and it's gotten louder. We were talking about how we grew up watching Fox News, Republican family members, our immediate family. And, I can remember just being maybe at a friend of my parents' house. And, if there was an earthquake in California, you're like, oh, they're getting what they deserve, because their lifestyle.
Right. Yeah. It's like shocking, but also like brings me back. Like, yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that. And then there's this, a lot of things are connected in terms of like, and this is going to talking about painting with a broad brush. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but like far right, homegrown terrorism, Waco, Timothy McVeigh, there's a great podcast. I don't know the name of it, but I'm going to put it like in the show notes or something. I think people should listen to it because it takes us from that point to where we are today in terms of how society looks at this and how they justify these votes by saying, hey, imperfect people can do great things. Just go back to the Bible.
That's yes, because so many preachers, pastors, whatever your denomination is, so many of them are using their pulpit as a platform for Trump and saying, he is flawed, and taking David and likening Trump to David, and there's a lot of weaponizing scripture and fitting into narratives, but that to me is so very dangerous, because then it's infused in your church, and when we were churchgoers, that's all we hung out with. You didn't hang out with anybody else because you didn't who they were or who they believed in, and these are our people. And so if that's all you surround yourself with and that's what you hear, and then if you're what you receive throughout the week, if it's just a far right leaning conservative news, whether it's cable, YouTube, podcast, whatever, then it's all you hear. And then you hear the leader of your church saying, this is what we believe, then you're being led.
Yeah. It's there's so much to unpack with this. You know, it is such a very deep and really, I feel like a dark rabbit hole. But if you just look at I'm interested to get your take on this, like the religious side of this, the misogyny that comes out of this. So that our deities, it's he.
Yes.
Right. I was just listening to a podcast the other day about the LDS church.
Ooh.
And how women are just like, their purpose is very, very simple.
Yeah.
It's procreation, it's homemaker, and that's about it. All the men, are, they're special, they're chosen, they're the protagonist in every story in their community. The
priesthood holder.
Yeah, it's just a big deal. And it's not maybe that extreme at your local Methodist church, but it's still there. And there's been a lot of that. We've heard a lot about the bro vote this time and how the white male or even the black male and the Latino male just came out in force for Trump. And one of the commercials that got me concerned was the commercial where Kamala was talking about transgender surgeries for prisoners.
Right.
I'm dying to hear your take on this.
The things I've heard from Democrat leaning podcasts and things that I listen to is that was one of her biggest faults, is she didn't come right out and combat that very specific message. I've not gone and listened to the whole thing. And what I'm about to say, I don't know if it's because I heard it somewhere or I'm like making an assumption. But what I feel like she's trying to say is, like, if you're imprisoned and you are a trans person, you will continue to receive the medical care you need. And I could be wrong. And then we could do a whole episode on the vilifying of trans men and women. I'd have to do some like good research on it first. It's such a low blow and such an attack on a very, very marginalized community in a very small portion of the population. And like these attacks on trans kids in school, and it's a dark rabbit hole.
Well, their perspective is, I believe this is true, is that it's really not real. So kids want to be trans because it's cool, or they're going through, maybe they're not being accepted by the boys at their school, and so they want to switch sides, or they are not that great at sports, but they know if they compete in women's sports, they'll crush it, or they want to get in the girls' bathroom because there's a sexual component to it, or it's just a deviant lifestyle, choice. These people are just bad people. And so that's what it is. I mean, you had Katie Britt talking about how she doesn't want her kids competing against men in sports and getting punched. Think about the Olympics.
But also, correction, if there's a man participating in, kids age sports, we got one problem, but it's not a man. It would be a child of similar age. So there's one example of using words that, create something bigger.
Yeah.
Iman Khalif, that the hate,
that wasn't even a trans person
she is still receiving is appalling to me, and it breaks my heart. And she's suing all of these people, including Elon Musk, and I hope she gets that bag. Like, I hope she wins. It's just
we need to come up with it. So they obviously use woke. We need to come up with our own word, because you had people freaking out over the opening ceremony of the Olympics and the drag queens that were in that.
Yeah.
Did you got all that?
Yes,
I mean,
and-
so people boycotted the Olympics,
Right.
which was a beautiful,
Yes.
amazing event.
And I will say, I didn't love the opening ceremony because I didn't understand it, because I don't know French history that well. My dad, who has been to France a few times, and my dad is one of those that like does a ton of research before he goes somewhere, including like looking at maps. And now I do it too. I wish we had watched the opening ceremonies with him and had somebody explain it to us. God bless Peyton Manning and Kelly Clarkson, but we really should have had a French historian on the NBC call.
Yeah.
We needed a French historian as our color commentator, to say, this is what this means. Like the heavy metal band that was playing that song, it was all about Marie Antoinette and like where she was held. And so it was so beautiful and symbolic, but we didn't. It went over our heads. And kind of going to something else, I think that's one bad thing the Democrat Party is not good at, is talking over people, and where we're receiving this leftist elite moniker that is, people are leaving the party because they think we're talking down to them. And I'm like, but my other side is like, but like, when was it a bad thing to like be educated?
Right.
That was like something we used to strive for. It's the okay, are you ready to take a journey with me? Can I go on this journey real quick?
Yeah.
It's the willful ignorance. The thing in my life that I can liken it to is when people question, like, what is faith? And you start questioning the Bible, and people are like, no, faith is just believing without seeing. It's believing without seeing. And it's like, well, that's a form of control, because if you don't know, then you can't like rise up and have a revolution. It's one of the main reasons why the Nazi Party burned books. Like people can't realize you're repeating history when you've burned all the history books. But to then take somebody, what they've grown up with, and to have them start to peel back the layers, it is a very scary thing to do. We have both done it, and we'll probably share that at some point, probably not today. But that's a choice, and I think a lot of people don't like sitting with that uncomfortableness and that uncertainty.
They're not even coming from curiosity, though. It's just like, somebody told me this was they're making fun of the Last Supper. It's sacrilegious,
Right.
and I'm gonna boycott the Olympics.
Yeah.
So they're immediately come from judgment, not curiosity.
And the willingness to just take everything at face value and not question or be curious and, well, what does this mean? And let me make my own conclusion. It was like when Kamala proposed her tax plan of unrealized capital gains for anybody making over $100 million a year. And my kind of quippy joke was, if you don't know what an unrealized capital gain is, it doesn't apply to you.
Right.
Like if this is not already of a concern, I had somebody in our extended family like liken it to property taxes. And it's like that. This is not what that means. It's just the willful ignorance is hard for me to then wrap my head around, to then try to meet somebody where they are.
Sometimes I get jealous of it because, like, I'm worried about our planet. I'm worried about our democracy. I'm worried about the future my kids are going to grow up in. And these other people, they just wake up and it's like the ignorance is bliss. It's like drill baby drill, and we're all going to heaven, and everything's all taken care of, and if anything bad happens, it's God's will. And It's just very, very simple. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's much more complicated and stressful and anxious. And so I don't know. I don't know if we'll reach anybody out there to help them to understand, but I also want to understand them. And I've been the other side. And so here's a point that I heard on a podcast from a left-leaning podcast that was talking about their reactions to the election. I thought this was a really good point. You got people out there that are struggling, to make ends meet, put food on the table. And here's the Democratic Party, which they're starting to call the Democrat Party, which is all these little jabs. Let's forgive their student loans. And they're like, well, I don't even have student loans. I wasn't privileged enough to go to college. I'm just trying to put gas in my car, and here we go. Right. So, I can understand how somebody would feel that way or think that and go, screw these guys. They're going to forgive their privileged college education bills, but I can't even put gas in my car. What say you? And then you see the transgender commercial that was literally played over and over and over and over and over. And it was interesting because I got overly confident when I saw how important democracy was to people in this election. But it wasn't the left. It was the right. From all the misinformation from 2020 and the election being stolen, the right was more worried about our election if the left won than vice versa, which is a scary, scary thing.
Yeah. Yes. And we have such recency bias. It would be really great if the insurrection happened like 6 months ago and it was really fresh on our minds. But it's like, well, it happened and they were charged and we had, we ended up having a peaceful transfer of power and here we go.
And there's no consequences for not even still to this day conceding the election. I mean, yes, there wasn't, there was technically, I guess, a peaceful transfer of power, but I mean, what does that say? I mean, it's like, this is what just gets me fired up. It's like, elections are only fair if we win. Courts, the judicial system is only fair if we win.
Right.
These were, all these trials and everything were all bullcrap. They were all DOJ, the weaponization of the DOJ and all those things. It's very, very dangerous where we're going. And I think that's, one of my reasons for wanting to come out of the closet and say, hey, I don't agree with you. Because when I wish we could go back to the day where we kept politics private, but I certainly want to sit through a dinner with friends and not have to talk about politics, not have to go camping and hear about politics.
Right.
Because they just espouse their stuff on you. It's like, I was at a Singo Bingo event with some folks and, just people were singing, making Kamala jokes with the lyrics. And I'm just like, can't we have one night?
Yeah. And especially around here, and I think this is why this space feels important for us, is you'll be with people you don't know, and then these broad statements will be made about the left, and it's uncomfortable. I don't like hearing that, and then they've just assumed I'm a Republican because I'm a white woman in Alabama, and I never know what to say because it finds me so off guard. When I was going to say, like, excuse me, I don't appreciate that. Maybe that's what I say. I don't know. But then I'm already uncomfortable. So then I have to like call out somebody, and then I would probably be the bad person. And it happens often. It happens so much. And I just, wish like, there are places for it and like people, when it's a safe space. But it's almost like in Alabama, there's no safe spaces.
Yeah.
They have conquered them all. And my dad is a part of the Birmingham Tip-Off Club, which is all avid basketball lovers. And he's got a little text thread. And he said, we never talk politics and we never talk religion.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it's like, what a wonderful
How do I join that
new
club?
community.
Yeah.
And he said about 90% is about basketball, 10% will be a little football, but they don't bring either of those things in it. And so then it's like truly this is our hobby. This is what we like to do. And I'm like, what a relief and an escape. And it just sounds so lovely and wonderful, because even, I don't know about you, but in a workplace, in a previous company that I've been with, people don't outright say it, but it's very insinuated about things. And then there's that other assumption that everybody's like you, and then you now feel comfortable in your workplace, and I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's hard out there for a blue dot.
Well, I mean, you can't go, I don't know, I'm sure it's this way in other states, but just, you don't see it really much anymore. But I can't tell you how many gas pumps I pulled up to where there's a sticker of Biden pointing at the price going, I did that. Like somebody literally took a sticker, put it on the pump, it's Biden, and there's a caption like, haha, he's laughing, I did that. And he's pointing at the prices. And just talking about, the ignorance, this is one thing that's really it's really troublesome for me, is that despite what Trump says he can't, and I don't even want to refer to him as Trump with this podcast, it's like maybe we'll just say 47 or something like that, because I hate giving him airtime. It's just the more good or bad press just fuels his fire. But there's a global economy. Inflation is global.
Yep.
I mean, going back to COVID, people thought that COVID, we hang out in RV parks with a lot of, solid rednecks, and I love hanging out with these people. This is why it's so messed up for me. I really enjoy these people for the most part, but then, when they say like COVID is a joke, it's like a cold. I'm like, are you watching the news in Italy when all these body bags were, being brought out into ambulances and things like that? So they don't understand COVID was global. Inflation's global. There is a right-wing pushback against inflation going across. I mean, people, the incumbencies are being outed all over the world.
Yes.
But everybody just feels like America's in this bubble, and our political leaders can turn inflation on and off with a switch. It's just not that way. Maybe we can reach some people out there with that, and they can do some research and not get their news from a biased place. Maybe we can help people identify where they can get news that's not biased.
That is why I love listening to NPR. And some people would say it's still left-leaning. Yeah, if it is, I would say it's like half a degree to the left. I don't, and if I'm like not listening to Taylor Swift in the car, I'm listening to, shout out, WBHM 90.3.
There you go.
I think I'm a big proponent. I am also an MSNBC person, but that was the network that I gravitated to when I shed my Fox News layers. And like people grow up and we're a Today Show family, or we're a Good Morning America family. You've got I'm an MSNBC and I'm a CNN person, and I've got to watch. I've developed those relationships, and being a good Alabama girl, Roll Tide. I was drawn to Joe Scarborough, who was a Alabama grad. But I recognize there are more left-leaning tendencies to that one, which is why I try to listen to NPR, and I follow on Instagram All Sides now. Do you follow them? Oh, it's good. Okay, it takes a headline and breaks it down by...
What's it called?
All Sides now. And it said, this is what, or like it takes a current event or something. This is what the left is saying about it. This is what the right is saying about it. And then this is what, usually like the Associated Press, which they call like the most, middle of the road. This is what they're saying it to then show how things are manipulated on both sides. And that's a really...
I'm going to have to check that out. It's fascinating.
It's cool. And for me, it's like, you'll see some things and you get a little defensive. And then I've got to sit with that defensiveness and be like, okay, what in me is trying to bow up?
Yeah.
What is this triggering? And then I have to kind of start working through that. And it's hard to sit with either the unknown or sit with like, oh, maybe I might have been wrong. And like, I would like to say, everybody say like, you can admit you are wrong. I would argue that in a role in your life, especially like in business and leadership, it is a sign of strength and not weakness. It builds like trust and rapport. And we should all be granted the grace to change our minds and not just.
Right. I agree.
This is my stance, and I'm not moving.
Yeah. I think that's even, if you talk about like the smidge of left leaning nature to NPR, it's like, it's even open. It's something as simple as open-mindedness. But don't trust any outlet where they don't bring somebody in from both sides.
Right.
I mean, it seems like, I don't know who this lady is, but I've just seen ticks on TikTok. But
is it Jessica Tarlov?
The lady on Fox News?
Yes.
Who just gives them hell.
Oh, yes.
She's amazing.
Uh-huh.
I don't even know how that has even happened, how that she even got allowed on that show.
New York Times just did a huge write-up on her. I don't know if it was this Sunday or the Sunday before. It was really cool to read. I'll share the digital article with you.
Well, please do.
Yeah.
And just how you've got Republican senators and congressmen that go and like Meet the Press. It's a show I've watched, ever since I was a little kid. I've worked for the Republican Party. I've gotten a paycheck from the Republican National Committee, and so have gone through this transformation over the years. But these people come on there and they say, well, CNN gets a lot of this, MSN sure gets a lot of this, but a lot of backlash. Oh, you're just, fact checking is a radical thing. Like, I mean, I saw a meme there that says, just beware of leaders that don't want to be fact checked. Why this is so bizarre, but these commentators are saying, well, can't you just say the election in 2020, like Biden won? And they're like, oh, I know your network loves to harp on this. Your liberal network loves to harp on this, but the American people don't care. It's just like Ronald Reagan would care a lot about people losing integrity and faith and,
Yes. And I think an argument that, a lot of, I don't know if a lot of like Democrats, but I think those of us who were raised Republican and have moved to the Democratic side, this is not John McCain running or Mitt Romney, or like, I'm going to call out John Huntsman, who maybe I voted for in a primary. This is, it's a much different environment. And, if it was, Liz Cheney, I would be like, don't love her policy, but like feel that our country is in safe hands. And a lot of people fear for the state of our country. And, getting out of the Paris Climate Accords, and what are our allies going to do, and what happens to Ukraine when we pull out forces, and is Israel, just now that Trump's in there, like going to wipe Gaza off the face of the earth? Like, there's just a lot of concern. And
there's going to be no shortage of material to talk about on this podcast.
Oh my God, right. I don't know if I want that, like, Gaza being wiped off the face of the earth, but and I don't know if this is a Republican argument or arguments I've seen certain Republicans make. Like, we're not for globalism, and I'm like, but where do you think all your stuff from Amazon comes from?
Right.
Like you said, we are in a global economy. Like, Well, Walmart's great and all, but all that is not being made in Bentonville, Arkansas.
Well, it's where Trump's Bibles or 47's Bibles come from. You know, I mean, they're coming from China.
Yeah.
I mean,
all of our meat is coming from Brazil. And we don't want to. Gosh,
listen,
we want cheap beef.
Yeah.
But we don't want it to come from Brazil. But then we don't want regulations over our farmers and how things are raised, or to even provide subsidies so we can keep generational farmers in business. But then we also don't want to pay $5,000 for a whole cow. So it's like none of it makes sense. Like you cannot have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just,
so I don't know how I went to like farmers, but thank you for the journey.
I think it just shows you how much there is to unpack. Like, I have all these notes about talking points I want to talk about today. We've got to very few of them, and we'll probably get to way more of them down the line. But it's like, where do you start with this?
Yeah.
What do you tackle first? There's so many issues. I mean, with this election thing, I mean, there was 400 people that the right likes to call the establishment Republicans that didn't support 47 in this one. I mean, that's odd. When your vice president doesn't endorse you, I mean, there's so many red flags. But I can just remember going to people like, I read John McCain's book, huge fan of John McCain. And to see them demonize him and then, desecrating his legacy and things like that.
A hero. Someone that we once claimed as an American hero.
Yeah. But spoke out against Trump, and he's nothing. He's just a weak guy that got captured. And I would hear Republican folks say, well, yeah, he gave the enemy a bunch of secrets, and he was worthless. And it's just weird. That's just very, very strange. But it's what Liz Cheney is feeling.
God bless her. Thank you for your service, Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
And for being brave enough to come out in support of a Democratic candidate, a woman of color, and not only coming out in support of her, but campaigning for her. I mean, Barbara Bush knocked on doors in Pennsylvania, and if that doesn't give you a sort of feeling, I hope I had. When I saw Barbara Bush was marking on doors in Pennsylvania, it still makes me cry.
Yeah. It's awesome. And it's, it's why I'm here today, because I'm really cognizant of what the repercussions might be for us sitting down and doing this. I mean, I think you being part of the LGBTQ community, I mean, people already know that.
Right. People mostly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and then, so.
And tends to then come with an assumption.
Yeah.
Well, you're gay, so you must be liberal.
Yeah. And
which is not true, which could be confusing for a lot of people, but this one is.
Because I do have my notes. I do want to get to this at some point, because I have been to tailgates with gay men who were so MAGA. And I'm like, that blows my freaking mind. How bad do you have to hate yourself?
Yeah. The first I encountered was 2012. And it was shocking to me. Even then, Fox News was using words like abomination for gay people. And, the way I would kind of rationalize it in my head is, okay, you want to protect your money and not pay taxes. And at that point, think, oh my God, think 2012. Obergefell v. Hodges had not been ruled. Gay marriage was not protected federally. So we were in I've got chills all over my body. We were in such a way different environment. 3 years later, we as the queer community gained marriage equality. And I think I would need to look at my notes, but somewhere in that time, additional protected classes were added. Sexual orientation, identity, gender expression. Those are all federally protected classes now, which I feel like you and I have may have more dealings with that, since we are realtors and we have to take code of ethics and abide by fair housing laws. So like that's a big thing, but just, yeah, like I was saying, like the 2012 Republicans and the, 2020, 2024, it's just a different environment. And I cannot, it is hard for me to wrap my head around queer people voting not only Republican, but for Trump. And I am not at a point in my processing to have those conversations.
Yeah, because we're only 8 days removed, like you mentioned earlier.
I mean, I'm like so just my own mental health right now.
JD Vance referred to those as the normal gays that voted red. What does that mean?
Right, yeah, the normal ones. Like, okay, like it just.
I don't see how these guys sleep at night, but it's all about power and money. I mean, it's I'm a very capitalistic person, but it does have a dark side to it, and we're seeing it now. We're going to put it above environment, above social justice, above a lot of things that are really important to a lot of people.
And I'd like to say this disclaimer, to people who vote Republican, for, taxes. We are 1099 employees. We are baseline already taxed higher than other people. It is not withheld from our paychecks. Whenever I get a commission check, I set it aside so that I can then pay my taxes at the end of the year. And then if you have an LLC or other sort of business entity, this is not going to be an accounting podcast, I promise, then we are subjected to self-employment taxes. So then we're taxed even more. It's like, we are people who understand those implications. And for me, other things are more important than money. If I cannot live my life and love my partner, what good does all the money in the world do for me?
Well, it's a concept that I encountered a long time ago. That when I first encountered, I didn't really understand it, but it's called conscious capitalism. And so
I've heard the term, so please tell me more.
Well, it's just an example would be like these billionaires and these massively successful corporations, don't want to pay taxes. The rich don't want to be pay their fair share type of thing. But think about all the goods and services, the roads they use that their goods are transported on.
Yes.
There's a giving back that they don't want to do. It's all about the margins. And everything else you just figure out how you're going to pay for it. I mean, how are you going to pay for it? But you see it in these other countries where Europe and Canada, where there's a lot of this, and that's socialism. And so it just gets this very I think demonized label that's very, very damning. But it's like, how much wealth does one person need?
Right. Right. There are these stats right now, and you might have seen them. It's like what the difference in like wages between like I don't know, it'd be like a factory worker or some sort of like person in a company, and what like the CEO made, and then now it's like hundreds of a percent more. It's like 3,000% more. And yeah, it's like, what, how much money does there's a disparity in what CEOs are making and what their employees are earning. And to me, it's corporate greed. Well, and listen, I've sat in these rooms. I've sat in rooms, I've been, an errand boy, let's say, in rooms where people are smoking cigars and laughing about this. Laughing about, how they gamify the tax system.
how just stupid people are, and just they're useful in only one way, or when they stop being useful to us and our corporation and our wealth, they've lost their value. And it's a real sad thing. But there's also another really good point here. Is like when I ride down these rural roads and see Trump flags on barns where the barn's caving in.
Yeah.
And these people are literally, coasting on fumes from paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And you wonder, how does somebody think that Donald Trump is going to help them or get them out? But there is always this thing among, especially the young Republican Party, that they're going to be rich one day. Like somewhere along the line, they're going to get out of this situation, and they're going to they want to protect that tax bracket because they're going to be there one day.
Right.
So there's a lot.
It's
so much.
Election night, I looked at Steph, and she grew up in Connecticut County. We inherited her parents' home and land down there when they passed a few years ago. And I looked at her election night and I said, Connecticut County went red. And it was shocking. And it's like
poor
tangential black belt. It like wouldn't be considered like the like true historical sense of like black belt in Alabama, but it's like right on the line and be contiguous. And it was just shocking to me. And her thought was the black people didn't come out and vote. They didn't think there was a reason or a hope or a chance. And just a very poor county in South Alabama, to go red is shocking to me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you how poor, like there's not a Walmart in the whole county. Like we have to drive to Bruton to go to the Walmart. I mean,
it's a lot of things. Because even the white folks, they're not, I don't know. When I ride through these communities like in Coleman County, Walker County, Winston County, I see some real, some people living in some really bad conditions. But, that Trump flag's pristine in the yard or wherever it is. It's just like, wow, how did we get there? And it's rooted, I think, in hereditary dialogue and just social situations, how we were raised. It's in religion. It's in all these different things. So I don't know if we'll be able to reach people with this, but at the very least, we know there's more people like us, and they need to know that we exist, and we see them, we hear them, and hopefully they'll tune in and get something out of this.
Right. And in some of those places, like a lack of understanding that like resources you receive in your counties are really like democratic policies. Things that like senior centers or people that bring food and stuff like that. So it's this not making a connection. Like, and also like government assistance shouldn't be a dirty word. It's there to help people. And just it's
looked at as a handout
Yeah.
by the right, and it's looked at as a hand up by the left. And like, I mean, these are very big gaps to try to bridge.
Yeah.
But like I said at the beginning, at the very least, I know I'm feeling better right now just talking about it.
Yeah, getting it off your chest.
Yeah.
Finding somebody like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like, am I crazy? Am I tail spinning? And sometimes just to know, like, maybe you are tail spinning, but like, you're not doing it alone. Like, you're not the only one. Like, to deal with this past week, I've had to be like, okay, like, what are my actionable items? I ordered some books that people would call political, that are threatened to being banned from schools and libraries. I'm part of this group on Facebook that a lady recommended that, and it might sound very small and trivial, but in that moment I thought, that is something I can do right now. And like, protecting books to me is a very, very important thing. When you reached out, that's why I was like emphatically like, yes, I can do that. Setting up a few like lunches with people. And then from there, it's like, okay, I've checked some things off the list. I've got some ideas. Now I can retarget my energy to like my real life and working my job and not going down the spiral, and then rinse and repeat. When these things get done, what else follows? And I hope I become more engaged and am able to do some small differences and be a part, and not just let this completely get me down. How have you dealt with the past week?
Well, I went to bed really early on election night. I just had a feeling.
Yeah,
it was over.
What about when did you have that feeling?
Like 8:30. I mean, it was early.
No, I'm like, I'm laughing. It's one of those things where like I asked the question expecting one answer and you gave me a time. About what state?
Oh, well, Virginia, maybe.
Yeah.
There was a couple troubling states in there. I mean, just
like North Carolina, Georgia. It was like,
North Carolina, Georgia. But then they started looking at Virginia, like, this is historically, a blue. It's not even a swing state. Those were really, really troubling. But just even how red Florida came. I was so surprised.
Miami-Dade County.
The voters of Florida upheld this abortion ban. I just, I think a lot of this stuff's interconnected. And so when you see that they did that, it's like, well, what's next? Yeah.
Miami-Dade County was a huge one. Speaking of another county, very large populous county with a high, immigrant population and, people of color population. I've not heard how Maricopa County went in Arizona. I'd have to go check that. But when they called Miami-Dade, I was like, oh, this isn't good. And then the abortion, I think, like, yes, was 57%, but for an amendment, you need 60, and that's heartbreaking. I know a lot of people in Alabama were hoping they'd pass weed, which they didn't get either.
Right.
And I'm just over here like, when can we get the lottery? Florida's about to get legalized marijuana, and we can't even have a lottery in Alabama. But this was, being a sports household that we are, I have started, Jamel Hill, who was a previous ESPN reporter or commentator, and she left after she called Trump a white supremacist.
On air?
Yeah. I'm not sure if on air or on a tweet, and left and has started her own, kind of media thing. And this new podcast is called Spolitics, and it's where sports and politics intervene. And it's so new. I think she's only done like 4 episodes. And her first guest was this guy who was on ESPN for years and years and years. And I didn't know him, which wouldn't really mean much. He lives in South Florida and was, I want to say he is Cuban descent. Maybe, I can't recall, but was talking about the large Cuban population and how they traditionally vote Republican because they see Democrats as like going back to like what they escaped. And it's just, so much of the way we vote comes from how we were raised and what's important to us, and really like everything that has happened to us and what brings us to this point right now. And I just look at it as like, well, I would say we're the party for, America. Like, come here and she shall open her doors and, whatever on the Statue of Liberty. But I don't have family who have run from a dictator. So that explanation humanizes people that have a different voting record than you.
It helps to make sense that they're actually voting against themselves or against the rights of their people. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's not going to work out for them. Unfortunately, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, it does help make sense. I mean, I listened to Megyn Kelly and, you know, I have a problem with a lot of what she says. I feel like she does it, you know, it's earning a living for her. It's entertaining people. Mm-hmm. A lot of it made sense. I was like, well, I can see how people would feel that way or have that opinion. Mm-hmm. But a lot of this is deeply rooted in misinformation. I mean, we've got other governments with all this misinformation, our own government misinformation, the ignorance, the lack of seeking to first mm-hmm. to understand. Mm-hmm. It's a big problem, and a big hurdle to overcome. But, you know, one thing at a time. I think I've learned a lot from, you know, podcasts you mentioned, this mm-hmm. other site. We mm-hmm. need to put this in the okay. notes so people mm-hmm. can self-discover these things. But so I think we need to start wrapping this one up. And then maybe hopefully in the next episode, maybe
be more linear.
Maybe have one topic that we really drill down on.
I feel like today I felt like a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And I just like, it's like the Taylor Swift song, Get It Off My Chest. Right. Like I needed this therapy with my therapy cat.
Right. Well, I had this agent contact me up on Smith Lake, and she was like, hey, can you do some marketing mm-hmm. for me? And I was like, sure. And she goes, well, first things first, you're a Trump supporter? Are you MAGA? And I was like, well, and this is true. You know, I didn't want to talk about being in the closet. I didn't want to out myself and say no.
Right.
But I said, you know, I'm kind of leaning Nikki Haley. And this is a very true statement. I kind of was, because I was frustrated with Biden not fulfilling this campaign promise of just being a transitional president. And, you know, I think that probably caused a lot of problems in this mm-hmm. election. You know, she had 3 months to run a campaign, and the result, that debate that he was in was awful. It was mm-hmm. just terrible. But I was like, hey, what do you think about Nikki Haley? And so this is a woman saying that she doesn't believe we should ever have a female presidential leader because women are too moody.
The internalized misogyny runs so deep for both men and women.
Shocking to me.
I'm gonna tell you, I'm sure in high school, as a dumb high school kid, I bet I said the same things about Hillary Clinton. Like, can't trust her when she's on her period. And like, that is awful and foul. And but then you think, okay, well, if I'm so defensive over Hillary being a woman, then there's something in me. And then there's that whole thing of self-discovery and self-reflection, which is a hard path to take. But I can see where like internalized like men's misogyny would come from. The women, it is so hard to break down because it is in the Bible. It is in our households. It's how so many of us were raised. It is so ingrained in our society. I was raised Church of Christ, where women could not hold like major positions of leadership within the church. You could not speak from the pulpit. Women could not pass communion or offering plates. I mean, it was a very traditional women's role. I think like one time we had like a female children's minister who I'm sure for their thought was, well, you know, it's low on the totem pole.
Yeah.
You know, you got the main minister and, you know, kind of your hierarchy. So many of us we have been conditioned that way, and it's hard to break free from. And I try to say that with understanding and grace as a woman who I've gone on my own journey of breaking apart that system that I was raised in.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to learn some things myself, because when she told me that, I was just I was shocked. And this is a
like
woman who's like an alpha woman, who's like sells a ton of real estate, and she's on billboards, and she's just loud and proud and out there, and just has all this energy. And I was like,
oh my gosh, I thought this was like a consumer.
No, this was an agent.
Oh, yeah. Now
I'm like, who doesn't do any marketing for herself and says, hey, come do that video stuff you do and help me, and was going to pay me for it. And I was like, yeah, that. And I was just shocked when she said that. And it was funny because there was a Facebook post with her. She went up to Georgia to oversee. She was one of those election monitors, or
a poll worker.
To make sure it was free and fair. And then she was a picture with her with 47, and they were just all giddy. And I was just like, gosh, talk about conditioning and brainwashing and everything. All right, let's wrap this up. I think since we are not sponsored by anybody, we should put in some plugs. Okay. So I would love to sell some Smith Lake homes. So if you're out there and you're interested in lake properties on Smith Lake, the cleanest lake in Alabama, just go to this site. I've set it up at smithlakeactivelistings.com. You can see everything that's on the market. What about you? What you want to plug? You got a new listing or something you want to website, call you?
My name is Sloan Roden. Do we want to say, I don't know if I want to say like company affiliations. I'm a residential realtor here in the Birmingham area, live in Hoover. And my market that I cover is a like 45-degree radius from Hoover. So if you are in central Alabama and you want to buy or sell, let me know. Smith Lake for Jason. If you are somewhere else in Alabama or even the Southeast, just thinking big right here, we have a wide array of people that we can connect you with. If working with a like-minded realtor is of importance for you, if you are a member of the queer community and you want to make sure that you work with someone who is also a member or an ally, I understand that home is very personal and you want to feel safe in that process. I get that. We would love to either work with you or connect you with somebody that we know.
All right, and just thanks for the grace. I know this episode was all over the place, but we're going to rein it in. We're going to come up with a title for it. We're going to do all kinds of organizational and detailed structural things to come.
Yes.
But for this one, it was just like, let's get some stuff off our chest.
Let's make the art. Yeah. Let's create, and we will decide later. Again, thank y'all for your grace. I was like a pressure cooker, and I went down the rabbit hole, and I will work on it.
Me too. See y'all next time.
Okay. Thank y'all.